So Mali is a mess. I mean, we've got an al-Qaeda group taking out the defense minister, a more nationalist group kicking the Russians out of the north, and both of them coming together to blockade the capital. It is very much a situation that could go any direction in the coming days. So to better understand what's happening right now, we're joined by Caleb Weiss. Caleb is the defections program manager Uganda at the Bridgeway Foundation and an editor at the Long War Journal. He's actually based in Africa, and the internet was not exactly stable, so we went with audio only on his end, but that actually allowed us to instead share a map that I think helps as we talk through the locations of some of these events. Now, you can follow Caleb and his work at the links in the description below, and with that, let's get to the conversation. All right, Caleb, sir, appreciate you taking the time. It's a little hectic, a lot of news coming out of Africa right now, and more than one person said, who you should talk to, Caleb Weiss, so thanks for taking the time, man.
Yeah, dude. Thank you for having me.
So if we could just start out maybe at a high level, what's going on in Mali, the attacks? Can you kind of bring us up to speed with what took place in the last, say, 72 hours?
Yeah, I think first to break down the groups responsible and then sort of what they're doing. So right now we're seeing a pretty big coordinated effort sort of attacking all across Mali by two groups mainly. That's JNIM, or the Group for Support of Islam and Muslims. That's al-Qaeda's official branch for West Africa, but also the Azawad Liberation Front. And this is sort of a coalition of Tuareg and sort of Malian Arab rebel groups. Both of them launched a joint coordinated offensive, literally attacking from the Senegalese border in southern Mali to the Algerian border in northern Mali, all at once. So in the north, you have JNIM and FLA jointly attacking cities like Kidal, Gao. They've taken over some smaller cities like Aglahak, Bur, which is close to Timbuktu. And they're sort of jointly controlling these areas. In the center and southern Mali, this is sort of unilaterally JNIM. They're attacking and have taken over, all of, or at least partial control over Mopti, which is one of Mali's largest cities. This town called Savari, which is close to Mopti. In the south, they're attacking both inside Bamako, the capital, but also in the outskirts. Important to note that in the opening salvo of this offensive, JNIM, they effectively offed the defense minister of Mali with a suicide car bomb at his personal house. They tried to do the same thing for Mali's intel chief, but I think he survived. They also attacked Bamako's international airport. To the south of Bamako, they're attacking military bases. Just today, they announced a total blockade over Bamako. Now, they were already doing a fuel blockade of Bamako, but now they've expanded that to everything for Bamako, so putting maximum pressure on the regime there. And to make matters worse, the Islamic State Sahel province, which is a relatively smaller group in Mali, they're taking advantage of the chaos, and they're doing their own offensive in the extreme north in what's called the Minika region. Now, they already sort of control most of that region to begin with, but due to the chaos and sort of Russian lines and Malian lines falling in the north, they're taking advantage of that to consolidate their territory. And I believe also just today they took over the city of Minika and some other towns. So not looking good there. Briefly mentioned it, but in the north and sort of elsewhere in Mali, the Malian regime was heavily reliant on Russian mercenaries from the Africa Corps, what was formerly Wagner. But those lines are falling. They're signing agreements left and right with both JNIM and FLA to do essentially, freedom of movement to allow their troops to withdraw and not get attacked. So those lines are crumbling. I expect that to follow in the center, but all eyes are essentially on Bamako and what happens there. As of right now, is sort of a black hole.
Did I hear correctly? You said Islamic State is messing around in this area. So we've got Islamic State, and then JNIM is al-Qaeda affiliated.
Yes.
Correct?
Yeah.
And then FLA, which is, could you talk about FLA a little bit? Because it's not Islamic State. It's not al-Qaeda.
Yeah.
There's kind of a weird partnership here.
Yeah. So, they're what you would call Azawad nationalists. So Azawad is sort of the local name for northern Mali. And this is sort of a struggle that's been going on, I mean, really since independence in the 60s. There's been various Tuareg uprisings around the idea of Azawad since. So these are mainly Tuareg groups. There's at least one Malian Arab group as part of FLA, but most of these are sort of long-standing rebel movements in the north. Sort of, the MNLA, which was the group that took over northern Mali with Al Qaeda and the Islamic Maghreb in 2012. There's another group called the High Council for the Unity of Azawad, or HCUA, which sort of broke away from what was then called Ansar Dine, which was a Tuareg jihadist group that essentially it was also a front for Al Qaeda, but now it's sort of the nucleus of JNIM. Those guys broke away and formed HCUA. Again, some other groups, but those are the two large ones. And yeah, they're just a coalition that are nominally fighting for the independence of Azawad, but because they have, long-standing ties with JNIM's various predecessor groups, both familial and, clan ties, there's a sort of a natural alliance there, even though it may not look natural on paper, because you have a jihadist group that is Al Qaeda working with, this nominally nationalist group, but it works for both. There's some misconceptions with Al Qaeda. They do work with non-jihadi groups, unlike the Islamic State. Al Qaeda is a little bit more open with that, and we've seen that a lot in Africa and Mali, to be clear.
Why now? I saw a couple of reports suggesting that this was kind of a surprise alliance. Do you know what prompted them to all of this? Like, this was a coordinated attack, well coordinated across the country. What prompted them to start working together now? Or have they been working together and we just haven't really heard a lot about it?
Well, there's a misconception that this is sort of the first time they worked together. They actually worked together, I believe it was last year or the year before, but there was a massive attack on a Russian column in the extreme north of Kidal, sort of near the Algerian border. And I mean, the Russians got, wrecked. FOA was using drones that were supplied by Ukraine. JNIM got involved. It was a mess. But that was really the first time that they coordinated. There's some debate on how closely they coordinated, but I mean, both of them were attacking the same thing at the same time. Clearly, there was some sort of communication between the two. But certainly, this is the largest coordination they've ever done by a long shot, and this is also probably the most unprecedented attack, even beyond 2012, which, again, Al Qaeda and the Tuaregs took over northern Mali in 2012, but they were stopped at a certain point. Nothing like what we're seeing over the last few days.
Yeah, maybe it would be good to provide some context here, because we are guilty of not following very much in the Middle East, let alone in Africa, over the last few years. So, we saw the reports of the car bomb. We saw a lot of footage from the Russian Africa Corps coming out. How does this relate? You're saying this is the largest attack since 2012?
Yeah, I mean, the largest coordinated offensive for sure. The impetus for this, I'm not really sure. I mean, obviously, as you noted, this requires so much coordination, so much logistical support. So, I mean, insane amount of planning. So I'm not, me myself, I'm not completely sure on the impetus anyway. But clearly, they're taking advantage of a distracted Russia who's engaged elsewhere. They're taking advantage of a increasingly weakened regime in Bamako. Again, keep in mind, they were already doing a fuel blockade on Bamako that was putting severe economic pressure on the capital. Elsewhere throughout the south and the center, they were doing other economic blockades on other important locales. So they've been hampering the pressure up and up on the regime that I think, just now became the opportune time. But again, I'm not completely sure the impetus here. But yeah, this is certainly the largest attack, and it's beyond 2012. Again, the FOA has sort of been attacking a lot in the north. A little more context on those. A lot of those groups were part of the Algiers Accords, which was signed in 2015, which was sort of supposed to bring all these different rebel groups in the north to essentially cooperate with the government in Bamako. By 2023, that kind of sort of fell apart, and Russia and Mali retook Kidal from the Tuaregs, and that restarted the conflict there. So that's been raging for the last 2 years. And obviously JNIM has been around much longer. They formed in 2017 from a merger of various different Al-Qaeda groups in the Sahel and especially Mali. But they've been steadily ramping up the pressure throughout Mali over the last couple of years. Again, like I said, with the blockades in the center and the south. But even in the north, they've been doing a lot of attacks. Sort of, again, Timbuktu, Gao, Kidal, sort of biding their time for a moment like this, and the moment happened. Again, the South is a little different, and I also think that it's a little bit more difficult for them in the South in the long run. This is something that I think watchers should pay attention to. In the South, they're not as popular, especially in urban centers. So if they are successful in taking over Mali, that's going to be a challenge for them. But yeah, like it's just sort of all coalescing now. I wish I had an answer on the impetus for why now, but I really don't. But this is sort of a long
Next
time
week.
coming.
We'll give you a week to dial that in. Yeah. So I'm hearing the term like rebel groups and, insurgencies. When we think of Al-Qaeda, Islamic State, that's kind of what we think of. But a blockade of the capital of the city feels like this is a sizable force, at least with a lot of power. I had no idea. What's going on there? It seems like something the government would be able to break. Or is it just that, that seems much more significant than a rebel group?
Yeah. Well, I think one problem is that sort of the size estimates of JNIM have always been vastly underestimated. I think the UN has been running with JNIM only has 6,000 fighters for the last several years. Obviously, something of this magnitude, literally attacking from Senegal to Algeria, would require more than that, especially with what they're doing. Obviously, the FLA provides some sort of force multiplier, but a lot of this is JNIM unilaterally. But yeah, I mean, JNIM is very strong. I mean, these guys are well equipped. They've got a lot of weaponry. They're capturing a lot of new weaponry when Mali and Russian forces are evacuating these bases in the north. Yeah, like the Malian state, like they're not that strong, and that's sort of they're relying on the Russians to sort of bolster those forces. But I mean, they're mercenaries. They're not equipped for what they actually need. And sort of what we saw perhaps in Afghanistan and a little bit in Somalia, where the government kind of controls a lot of the urban centers, but a lot of the rural areas are controlled or contested by insurgents. Same thing here. So in rural areas, especially in the South, JNIM is really contesting these spaces, and they're making it difficult for Malian troops to sort of redeploy or send reinforcements. And that's sort of why these blockades have been successful, is that JNIM is able to sort of effectively maintain control over the regime's movement. And I think that's important to remember.
It's a complicated relationship the U.S. has with Russia when it comes to counterterrorism, fighting kind of alongside Russia in Syria against Islamic State. I know in Africa it's gotten a little messier. What's that dynamic here? Are the Russians, they've got the Africa Corps there. Are they assisting the Mali government? Are they kind of propping them up? Can you get into that dynamic a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, I think most listeners are probably familiar with, Mali is a former French colony. Al-Qaeda and the Tuaregs took over the north in 2012. France intervened militarily in January 2013. They were there for 7 years, and then when the current military regime came in power, Bamako, they kicked the French out, which kicked the Americans out. And then in return, they brought in Russia, which at that point it was still the Wagner Group, and sort of that became the new security partner. I don't think it's as sort of embedded in the government system, like perhaps in Central Africa Republic, where Wagner or Africa Corps essentially controls that government. It's a little different in Bamako, but they're still heavily influential. They're still important security partners. There's about 2,500, I think, Russian mercenaries across Mali. For the past couple of years, Mali has been reliant on them for a lot of the offensive actions against JNIM or against other rebel groups. effectively becoming frontline troops for the Malian state. So they are a key security partner for Mali. The Americans have, in the last year, started to re-engage with the military regime of Bamako. I think the Americans realized something like this was probably in the works. I think they were very worried about JNM. They are them and Al-Shabaab are Al-Qaeda's largest groups in Africa, if not in the world. So AFRICOM has been taking this very seriously, even though they lost their drone base in Niger. I think their ISR capabilities are certainly limited in this space, but they have been re-engaging Bamako for the last year. So we'll see what happens in the wake of this current offensive. So far, I've not seen any indications from the Trump administration to get involved. He's very unpredictable, so who knows? But with the Americans re-engaging, could be. But that just sort of adds to what you're saying. It's very complex dynamic between the U.S. and Russia. On some spaces like Ukraine, they're competing. In other spaces like technically in Syria and then possibly here, they kind of are on the same side.
Messy.
Yeah.
Seems like it's always messy when Al-Qaeda and Islamic State get involved. Is there, this is a problem in Mali for the Mali government. The people in charge, the president, they're at risk. Is there any concern about spillage into other countries nearby, or do you think this is probably going to be relatively focused inside of Mali?
No, I think that's a valid concern to be worried about spillage. I mean, I think listeners should be aware that JNM is not a sort of homogenous group. I mean, this is a group that comprises of multiple different ethnicities across Mali, multiple different nationalities across West Africa. So their sort of desires or goals is not contained to just Mali. I mean, this is a literal Sahel-wide, if not wider, West Africa-wide movement or group. They are attacking in Burkina Faso already. I believe the estimates are they control anywhere from 35 to 40% of Burkina Faso, control or contest, rather, sorry. Though they have a sizable presence in Niger. They've been attacking in Benin and Togo. They've previously done low-level insurgency in Ivory Coast. JNIM is also pushing into western Nigeria. The concept that what's happening now in Mali could spill over to these neighboring countries, I think, is something that should be taken very seriously. It's also possible that units that were previously stationed in, say, like Burkina Faso have been moved into Mali for this. Well, what happens when they move back? Do they want to do their own sort of offensive there? Because, a lot of the units in Burkina Faso are native, Burkinabe, or in Niger, they're Nigerians, so they have a lot of local units, again, comprised of various different ethnicities. I think it's only human nature to think they would want to expand sort of whatever Islamic polity that they may or may not be able to prop up in Mali to their home countries, if that makes sense.
We probably should have started with this. Negative points for the interviewer here. What are the end states for FLA and JNIM? Like, we can see that the government is in trouble and the Russian Africa Corps is trying to keep everything together. But if they push the button for victory and they win today, what does that look like for these two organizations?
Well, and I think this is what makes the alliance between JNM and FLA really interesting, because on paper, it's sort of two different things. FLA, again, is fighting for independence of Azawad. That's northern Mali. On paper, they're not really Islamist. I mean, they're fighting for sort of a free, independent, sort of democratic northern Mali. The FLA alliance itself is sort of pluralistic in that it has also different ethnicities and different groups, even different tribes within the Tuareg confederations. And then you have JNM, which is Al-Qaeda, and it wants essentially an Islamic emirate in Mali as part of Al-Qaeda's theorized global caliphate. That's what they're fighting for. And then, on paper, that's two, diametrically opposed things. Now, there are rumors abound that FLA has agreed that if they are successful, maybe they would allow JNM to implement Sharia, but would still be like an independent Azawad. I don't know if that's true or not. I think the idea of what happened in 2012, in which Tuaregs and Al Qaeda worked together, but eventually Al Qaeda kicked the Tuaregs out and took over for themselves, could be another real possibility here. I don't know. But it all depends on sort of the agreements made behind the scenes between FLA and JNIM, which I think a lot of people don't really know the terms and conditions of that alliance. But something to really watch in the future if they are successful in Mali.
It feels like the Al Qaeda Taliban relationship in Afghanistan, where the Taliban were always just so focused domestically, essentially, right? Creating the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. And then Al Qaeda was like, no, we're just going to focus. Is it kind of in line with that, do you think?
Yeah, sort of. I think the Taliban model is more apt for JNIM than, say, like the HTS model of Syria. It's sort of as a frame of analysis. So kind of, but also like the FLA again is nominally not Islamist. So like even with the Taliban, like fundamentally they are Islamists. They're not Salafi. They're Deobandi, but like they are extremists. The FLA not so much. But they are solely only caring about Azawad. So in that regard, yeah, it's very similar. And JNM would be more concerned about the its inherent transnationalness and expanding this emirate to wider Sahel or West Africa.
I mean, I appreciate you kind of walking through that because I feel like it's tempting personally. It's always, I want to draw comparisons and say, oh, this is like that thing, or maybe an historical example. But when we get into this realm, it feels like everything is so unique. There's so many just very specific nuances to what's happening in southern Mali right now that it's hard to draw a comparison. But yeah, can be helpful.
For sure. There has been a lot of discussion over the comparisons. This has made a little Twitter thread about it of, I've seen some people analyze it through the HTS sort of model as Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, who took over Syria in late 24. I don't really think that's applicable here. Just because, again, HTS solely focused on Syria. Yeah, they had foreign fighters, but they were primarily fighting for and within Syria and didn't really have a transnational agenda. And they have disavowed jihadism. They have accepted the international order, and especially the U.S. We've seen no indication of that with JNM. There are some rumors that JNM wanted to leave Al Qaeda in early 2025, but here we are, almost, getting into the mid 2026. That hasn't happened yet. They haven't shown any indication of disavowing that. They haven't shown any indication of wanting to engage with the international order beyond just sort of getting concessions for what they actually want in Mali. So to me, I think if you want to look at it from another frame of analysis, it would be the Taliban model. And I'm very glad you brought that up because a few people have sort of utilized that frame, and I'm very glad you're making that connection.
There we go. Love it. All right. I'm here for the compliments. Is there any indication that there could be international involvement here? Like, is this getting to the point, or could it get to the point where another nation, U.S. or elsewhere, might step in and try to beat back this JNIM offensive?
Man, I don't know. Like the UN has sort of expressed concern, whatever that means.
They do that, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what that actually means.
They're always concerned, yeah.
I don't know if that means like the UNSC is gonna convene. I don't know. But for all intents and purposes, like no one has made like any sort of statement that would even be read as they're considering action. Not France, not the US, no one else. Like as of right now, Tuesday, April 28th. So far, it's just Russia that is saying that they'll defend Mali.
So what are you watching for here? And let's call it the next few days, into the next few weeks. What are you keeping an eye on to see which direction this goes?
That's a great question. Off the top of my head, I think two things. One, what happens in Bamako? Like I said, they announced a total blockade of it. They were able to assassinate the defense minister at his personal house. They might have got the intel chief. The reports are from earlier today that they're still operating. JNIM is still operating freely in various parts of Bamako. So that's what I'm watching. Number one is what happens there. Does the regime fall? Is there a coup? Do they start making concessions to JNIM? all of those things. The second thing I think would be what Russia does. Like I said, in the north, their lines are essentially collapsing, and they're signing agreements to provide safe passage for their troops retreating. If that happens across the board, say again in central Mali, and then especially in southern Mali towards Bamako, I think that is sort of writing on the wall for the regime. It's on its last legs. It's already not looking good. But I mean, the offensive just started. Anything could happen at this stage. But right now, it's not looking good that Russia's actually going to be a good defender of the regime.
Syria all over again from the Russian perspective. In fact, some of the Russian analysts I've seen recently, they've been hammering the point that this is not Syria. Like, I don't know, man, give it a little bit of time here. It might end up being the same deal.
Well, I mean, that's the thing is like Russia through it, its paramilitaries, Wagner or Africa Corps. When shit gets, so I don't know if I can curse on this thing,
you're good. But
okay, when shit hits the fan, though, Wagner retreats. Or Africa, like we saw that in Mozambique, like the first sign of trouble, and they lost some dudes, they dipped out of there. In Libya, sort of the same thing. In CAR, they have too much involved there economically to really matter. In Syria, they lost. Like, I don't really think they've proven to be a good security partner, be it these sort of revolutionary states kicking out, longtime Western partners, turning to them. I don't really understand the appeal, but here we are.
Yeah, keeps happening. Well, it'll be interesting to see which way it goes. And I think Russia's kind of on the clock, man. They've had one after the other. I mean, we talk about Venezuela, different categories, of course, but between Venezuela, now Iran, Syria, and now we've got Mali. There can be some issues for Putin and how they're exerting power.
No, and I think, one thing to perhaps end on is there is a Ukrainian angle here. Ukraine is supplying the FOA with drones. That's sort of the FPV drones that they're using as kamikazes. FOA has shown a lot of videos in the last few days of them blowing up some Russian dudes with those, which I'm sure Ukraine is happy about. I have some personal qualms that they're sort of inadvertently helping Al-Qaeda, but it is what it is.
You could tell something was going on there because Hezbollah has been putting out their FPV footage, and it looks like me flying the drone. It's all over the place and like probably missing targets. But the FLA guys are like, they're buzzing convoys to get the truck to stop and then coming back. Yeah, like okay, they know what they're doing. Somebody's help. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it was last year, like some FLA dudes were being cheeky and posted photos online of them in T-shirts with like the Ukrainian trident thing. Very obviously not so subtly implying that Russia is helping them.
Gives it away there. Ukraine is helping them, not Russia.
Yeah.
The polar opposite.
Oh, sorry, my bad.
Well, that's awesome, man. It's a lot to understand. So I know we have a very short attention span here in the United States. So it's helpful to have folks like you so focused and so invested in areas like the Sahel. So when it does spiral like this, we've got somebody to tap into. So Caleb, thank you so much for taking the time, man.
Yeah, happy to do this. Really no problem at all. Hope to be back.
Absolutely. Be safe out there, man. All right, so thank you again so much to Caleb for taking the time to walk through all of that. So valuable to have somebody that is spending all of his time and energy focused on this area and these specific threats to be able to talk through something like Mali when a big attack like this kicks off just in the last couple days. So, of course, be sure to follow Caleb at the links in the description below to keep up with all things going on in the Sahel. But that's all we got for now. Thanks for watching. We'll see y'all next time.